Welcome to the Red River Paddlecast. I'm your host, Brad Friesen. In this episode, I sit down with John Thompson, who shares fascinating stories and the rich history of paddling in Manitoba. We dive into the legacy of Les Voyageurs Canoe Race and its 100th anniversary celebration at this year's Red River Paddle Challenge. From the evolution of paddling gear to the revival of this legendary race, get ready for an inspiring journey through time. Let's get into it. All right, so I'm here with John Thompson. John, thanks for joining me today on the podcast. How are you?
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Excellent. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, background, all that stuff?
Well, I'm a third generation paddler. My grandfather started paddling in the late 1890s with his brother in Winnipeg. I guess that was the thing that you did when you were young and had energy. And there's, no internet, no TV, no stuff like that. It was hop in the boat and explore your surroundings. And so my dad paddled. He met my mom canoe racing in Winnipeg in the 40s. I've always paddled. It's just part of the family, part of what we've done. And so it's been an adventure. I started, just paddling like every other kid. And then when I got into university, my brother and I decided to try marathon racing, and we wound up paddling an old Chestnut Prospector in a competitive race and on the Fraser River in BC, and wound up placing second, which was a horrible surprise. We were still teenagers at the time. And then I went out the next year with a lady that I met through the canoe club and won the mixed, and then thought, well, check that box off. So then we got onto whitewater kayaking, and so I was on the BC whitewater team and certified as a kayak instructor and did a lot of, teaching work and so on, and wound up doing a television commercial for Molson Canadian on the Chilliwack River. So I still drink Molson Canadian as a way of brand loyalty, I guess.
They converted you for life.
Yeah. Well, they paid me well. We paid for half a day, and you got royalties every time the thing showed. And the great irony is I have never seen the ad because liquor advertising was banned in British Columbia at the time. So,
really? So where was it aired?
The rest of Canada, as far as I could tell.
Except BC. Wow. Maybe you're on YouTube somewhere. You should take a look. Maybe we can dig up that old ad.
I've looked and I can't find it. I've found bits and pieces that are similar. Like there was log rolling, and it was a real composite of, part of being Canadian. So Canadians, did log rolling and whitewater kayak or canoeing and all
and
sorts
beer
of
drinking.
others. Yeah, it was Canadian identity in the 70s. So I wound up, doing that, and then I wound up moving to Calgary in the 80s and wound up joining both of the canoe clubs there. And in the mid 80s, I got asked to run the United Way Voyageur Canoe program. It was a fundraiser for the United Way, and the guy that founded it the year before passed away, and they didn't have somebody to take it over. So that was great fun. At one point, we had 18 teams in Voyageur canoes zipping around the Calgary Reservoir in races that lasted 20 minutes. And it was just a lot of fun because I had to teach these guys how to steer these things and so on and so forth. And I moved back to Edmonton in 1990 and helped run the Klondike Days canoe race and competed in that a couple of years, and then got approached because dragon boating was coming in. So I was the first race director and got the dragon boating started in Edmonton. And I used to teach people 50 to 60 at a time how to dragon boat. And then I remember, I think year 2 or year 3, I was coaching 11 teams at once, and it got pretty busy doing boat changes and the like. But, and then I wound up helping start the breast cancer survivors program here. So I was their coach for the first 3 years. And so I've continued to stay active. And last year was my first outrigger canoe race in Penticton. So the only thing I haven't paddled yet is a flat water boat. And I look at those and think they're too tippy. Thank you very much.
Maybe one day, maybe we'll get on one. That's awesome. So, paddling has obviously been a big part of your life growing up and continues to be so. And from what I know about you too, it's also been a big part of your family's history.
Yes. Yes. So the Winnipeg Canoe Club, 1893, they started, and obviously it got the attention of my grandfather and his brother, and I've got a whole series of pictures of them doing backcountry trips in the early 1900s. My great uncle was a photographer. And so he's got all these pictures of Lake of the Woods, the rapids, the boys in their Winnipeg Canoe Club singlets and whatnot, doing portages and catching fish and camping and just having a heck of a good time. I also have pictures of my grandfather courting my grandmother in a canoe. So, she's all laid back in the boat with the parasol, and he's wearing his suspenders and white shirt and tie and the little, golden armbands and looking all quite proper and whatnot. So World War I came along, and both my grandfather and his brother went off to fight, and my grandfather came back and my great uncle didn't. So in 1926, my grandfather was the Commodore of the Winnipeg Canoe Club. And so he created something he called the Les Voyageurs Canoe Race in memory of his brother. And so this was a race that couple of days, you start at the Winnipeg Canoe Club up to Lockport. You had to camp overnight. You had to carry your own equipment. And minimum weight of 50 pounds. And you had to do some portaging the next day. And then you had to paddle upstream back to Winnipeg. Actually pretty grueling in the early days. The winning times were 11 to 14 hours, depending on weather and current and all of that stuff. And you got to remember that's before the floodway. So,
Right. Yeah.
a little bit more current than there is now. And so he ran that race up until 1963. He was in his 80s at that point. He had this motorboat that he kept at the club. And I can actually remember going out and, doing the river trip with my grandfather wearing his little white hat and his whatnot, and going and camping up at Lockport in the boat and then coming back the next day. So that would have been about the time that, maybe they took his boat license away from him. I'm not sure. He was getting pretty old at that point.
You mentioned that the Red River floodway wasn't around. I could imagine the river probably looked a lot different back then than it would now. Would you say were the banks, was the water higher or lower,
Well, I think that
or
it
just more
varied more.
current? Yeah. Okay.
So, because Winnipeg Canoe Club experienced a couple of massive floods in the early 50s, and it did manage to survive both of them. But the pictures that I've seen, it was right up, and so a lot more variability. I remember too, they used to swim off the dock in front of the canoe club, and so that the trick was you'd jump in at the upstream end and swim like mad and hope that you had enough momentum to get the downstream end of the dock. Otherwise it was, swim to the shore or have somebody pull you out.
Yeah, I guess now, like, especially in the summertime too, the current isn't very strong. There is current on the Red, but it's not very strong like it is in the springtime, like right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Certainly wouldn't want to jump in right now and go for a swim. It's not only is it really cold, it's fast and
Yeah,
debris.
no, not a lot of fun. It's interesting going back through all of the records. They used to keep magazines and stuff like that. And I guess one of the things that the Winnipeg Canoe Club used to do as their season opener was that they used to go, and as soon as the ice was clear, they drop a keg of rum in the river at the U.S. border. And they would let that float down. And of course, there was a flotilla of canoes around it to make sure it didn't get hung up and whatnot. But the official opening of canoe season was when the cask hit the dock at the canoe club, and they would haul it out and have the toast. And that was the season beginning. So I always thought that was kind of a fun thing to do.
That's too bad that tradition got lost. Maybe we should bring that one back.
Yeah, I talked about it, doing it, something like that in Edmonton, but we don't have the paddling community that we used to. Yeah, it's changing times.
Yeah, well, to go from the U.S. border to where the old club was, that's what are we pushing here? 160 kilometers of rum barreling travel down the river.
Well, that's right. And the one record I saw suggested that they linked up with the armed forces, and they were providing logistical support and help setting up the camps and keeping an eye on it to make sure that it didn't get waylaid along the way by somebody with a sense of thirst.
Red River Pirates coming in for the rum.
That's right. Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah, so I know like when you paddle on the Red today, you can see where the old club was. So the old Winnipeg Canoe Club was where the Canoe Club golf course is now,
Right.
near it's Kingston Row. What's that street? Dunkirk, in that area. And on the north side of the river is where the clubhouse was. And if you go there, it's not right now, but when the water drops, you can actually see part of the piers and the posts from where the docks used to be. There's still remnants of the old dock there. So we'll see that when we go by there, and it's quite a different site now than it was 100 years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah. The Winnipeg Canoe Club, your original thinking is, in terms of the canoe clubs of today, a bunch of people that are fanatics about canoeing, they get together and do trips and like that. Winnipeg Canoe Club was actually very, very different. It started that way, but it became the equivalent of the Golf and Country Club today. In its latest manifestations, it had a ballroom, a restaurant, tennis courts, golf course. It tended to only run seasonally until I think it was the 70s. But it was the cool entertainment thing to do on the weekends. The ballroom would open up, they'd host dances, and that's what young people did. One of the guys I got to know here was as an old Winnipegger who survived. What's the famous Great Escape, the movie? He
Okay.
was actually there. He was the bellows operator. So very, very interesting story. Anyway, he grew up in Winnipeg, and I was talking to his wife, and she said she was a dancer. She used to dance at the club back in the 20s and 30s, because that's how you socialized and met people and so on. So really a sort of key to Winnipeg culture for years and years and years.
Yeah. That's really neat. So they would have all sorts of special events at the club, dances, regattas, and then summertime, of course, they'd have these paddling events as well. Was there an involvement with the Olympics? Did anyone go on from the club to the Olympics there? Was there a connection there as well?
Yeah, so they were a pretty competitive club. There were actually three groups in Winnipeg that competed. There was something called the Kildonan Canoe Club, and then the YMCA had its own program. And so they would get together and hold regattas every year. And the really good folks would then go off and compete in Ontario, because that was where the hotbed was. And so when I look back at the past winners of the Les Voyageurs, there were three guys in particular that were very successful long distance paddlers, and they were part of the designated Canadian Olympic team for Tokyo, but unfortunately World War II came along, and so they never did compete, but they were of that caliber. You've got Bill Brigden. Bill Brigden paddled with the club for years, and he went and competed for Canada at the Olympic Games in Finland. And the interesting story there is he was in his mid-30s when he did it. He was not the young, the spring chicken that we're seeing these days, the young, fit athletes that go and compete. So, here he is at 34 representing Canada. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, gives hope for us still, right?
Yeah, I'm beyond that. My Olympic dreams are gone. Maybe my son. I don't know. I don't know that he likes paddling that much.
Yeah, my boys like paddling, but they're even too old for that. So, but there was a huge interest in competitive paddling. Regattas all the way through Ontario, and the Winnipeg Canoe Club even hosted the Canadian Championships one year. So it was really sort of, I think, maybe on the edge of paddling. Certainly that level of interest never extended into Saskatchewan or Alberta or even BC for that matter. So, Winnipeg was sort of I guess, an adjunct to Ontario in terms of this.
Yeah, and could be too just our influence. We have two major rivers going through a big city, right? So yeah, it's great to see that this river's always had a paddling history and people getting out and using it. It's neat to hear about the competition with these different clubs that used to take part and race and compete. That's
Yeah,
really
and it was always flat water, short
Mhm.
stuff. The
Sprints and whatnot. No long
Yeah,
distance.
no long distance other than the Les Voyageurs.
Yeah. So let's chat about Les Voyageurs because I mean that's sort of why we're here and how I guess we came to know each other. So I had never heard of this race before, and it's coming up 100 years. And so I've done the Red River Paddle Challenge. This will be year 8, and up until you contact me, I believe it was a couple of years ago now, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago that you
Yeah.
reached out and contacted me. So I'm curious. Let's how'd you hear about the paddle challenge, and what gave you this idea to want to bring back and celebrate this amazing event?
Well, again, with the family history, I thought, you know, 2026 is coming up. It would be 100 years since my grandfather started it, and that why not? It's a way of, I think, celebrating the past, the canoe club, the people that were involved, all of that stuff. I guess over time I've become more interested in history and ancestry and all of that sort of stuff. And I think the younger generation sort of forget that life wasn't always the way it is. And so, here we are 100 years after my grandfather started this thing. And I thought, well, let's see if we can recreate the race and perhaps get Winnipeggers to understand a little bit more about the history and also to celebrate the canoe. Canada's had a long ties to the canoeing as part of its culture. And sometimes we need to step back and think, life would be very different if the canoe hadn't been part of Canadian historical development. So, let's celebrate that too. So this idea had been percolating in my head for 4 or 5 years. And, the trouble with being in Edmonton is logistically, how do you go about doing something like that? And
Right.
so I was just flipping through one day and I went, what the heck is this? There's a Red River Challenge and it's in September, which is the same time of year my grandfather. And the 2-day race, the tie to Lockport. I mean, this is just too coincidental not to be a match made in heaven. So I reached out and here we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you did, and when you sent me this document explaining all the history and stuff that you talked about earlier on the show here, and the details of the race, and I couldn't believe the similarities between the two events and how that, I had never heard of this before. Yet we have these almost identical events. So the first event, the original event, went from the old canoe club, and to mention they went up to Lockport, overnight camped, and they had to carry all their camping gear with them. So there was it was a 50-pound weight limit, correct?
Yeah, it was minimum 50 pounds. And so it was squeeze in what you could. And then you had to carry it. And they had a portage loop at Lockport that,
right.
Yeah.
So the portage pass the locks, put in, continue paddling to around Lower Fort Garry, turn around, come back, portage the locks now on the west side, and then continue paddling upstream back to the Winnipeg Canoe Club.
Yeah, that second day was a killer.
That would be, especially, if there's, you're going up against current, and if there's strong current.
After having just done all your portaging.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
And and you think about comparing it now to in the past. Okay, so now the route, we don't do the portage. We stop, and there is no overnight component. You can go sleep at your home or get a hotel. So it's a little different now, and we don't have the weights. But then the gear's different too. Like we go way back when, and how much did the average canoe weigh back in the day?
Well, it's interesting because they were using, up until the 60s, their preferred model was the Peterborough wood canvas boat. And so
that's got to be 60, 70 pounds?
Yeah, 60 to 70 pounds. And of course, they were using, one-piece single-bladed paddles, usually quite long. And they didn't, they just paddle like a regular boat with the J-stroke and all of that sort of stuff. There were some interesting gear changes when fiberglass boats came in. I think that caused all sorts of issues because obviously they were lighter and faster. And then I don't think they ever had bent shaft paddles. I don't think the bent shaft paddles really showed up until later in the 70s. But I do know that people were experimenting with ultra wide. The whole technology for building laminated paddles, so you could get sort of beyond the width of a tree, didn't really show up until the 60s. And then a company called Clement in Quebec, they were producing paddles that were, 10, 12 inches wide. And all of a sudden, the guy with the widest paddle, as long as they were strong enough to pull it, was going to win. So I can remember my grandfather one year decided to level the playing field. So he forced everybody to use the same paddle. And he had Bill Brigden build these things. And they looked like crossing guard signs. They were red fiberglass octagons bolted onto a piece of dowling. They were the ugliest things you've ever seen. I still have a couple of them. You know, no self-respecting paddler these days would want to be caught with something like that.
Wow. And so they would do Les Voyageurs Canoe Race with these?
Yeah, yeah. The whole
Man,
idea is everybody has to use the same paddle to take
yeah.
it. You know, the standardized technology.
Wow. We should bring, if you can bring them out to the event, we should bring them out and
Yeah, no, I plan on doing it.
maybe we'll see if we have any volunteers to use them.
I still have my grandfather's 1890s vintage Peterborough basswood plank boat that I've restored. So I'll be bringing that out to Winnipeg with me. The other thing too is they used to use double blades a lot. If you're going to go long distances, double blades the way to go, but not double
Now,
blades.
when you say double blade, are you referring to double blade like a kayak blade or something
Yeah,
different?
exactly.
Okay.
But not like the kayak paddles of today. These were probably 3 feet longer. Because you know you're sitting up higher, you want to get more leverage, that sort of thing. So I still have a pair of those, one in better shape than the other, and I'll be bringing those out as well. I mean, beautiful carved pieces of Douglas fir with a lap joint that have been wrapped in string
Yeah.
and resin to hold it all together. I mean, the whole technology's changed so much.
It has. It's in 100 years. I mean, everything performance orientated now, it seems, is carbon fiber, and you can lift a whole boat up with one hand. There's things are so light and just more durable and whatnot. The boats and the gear we use have really evolved, and so we go back to the camping gear for another example of things that they would have to bring. A big canvas tent back in the day. Well, that's probably going to take up a good portion of your canoe space on this race.
And you're 50 pounds.
Yeah, so I mean, nowadays you can get small little bivy sacks that fit in your back pocket. It's really changed a lot, and so it'd be interesting though if we're not doing the 50-pound weights. If we were, that would be quite interesting to see because the original race was just canoes, and obviously the Red River Paddle Challenge is all boats. So it would be kind of interesting, I guess, to see how someone would fit 50 pounds worth of gear on a paddleboard or a surf ski or an outrigger canoe or a 10-foot Pelican kayak from Costco.
Well, and I mean, the whole boat dynamics changes because, you throw 50 pounds in there, you sink a little bit more. It's going to take a lot more energy to get it up on plane. And I'm not sure what it would feel like to keep it on plane, how much effort you would have to use.
It's a lot slower. I mean, coming from experience paddling a heavily loaded paddleboard, it's a lot more work. Obviously you're working harder to keep that boat moving. It requires more efforts, and your speed just drops.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, as soon as you take the weight off, you feel the boat lift up. You're not sitting as deep, and it's less effort to keep that boat moving. And it would be the same for other boats as well. I think the paddleboard being probably the most sensitive to a bunch of extra weight.
No, yeah. The sort of paddler to boat ratio is a lot higher.
Yeah. Then there was another story I wanted to ask you about from what I heard about the original race, and that was this paddler's breakfast that involved eating giant 8-inch pickles.
Yeah, no, that's people were told to take their own food. They had to be self-reliant, and yeah, the story was a couple of guys decided to cheap out and not take a whole lot of food. So I guess some guy packed a pickle for his sustenance, and I'm not sure that he did so well. Not a lot of protein, not a lot of energy.
I heard that if you ever get cramps, pickle juice is something to drink to get rid of that cramp. So maybe there was something to their strategy.
I think more likely it was they'd been in the bar the night before, and this was the best they could come up with for food on the day of the race.
Well, I don't know. I think we should bring back or make a new pickle tradition here and provide everyone a pickle at the finish line. Maybe we can find a pickle sponsor, a local Manitoban pickle company. I don't know if we have any, but if there's any out there, reach out.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go crazy, you could do the sour toe cocktail like out of Dawson City. Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody at the end has to drink a sour toe cocktail shot. That would be.
I'm keeping my toes intact.
Yeah.
So one of the traditions of the original race was that the winner of the race would get their name added to this shield that you have here. Can you tell us a bit about the shield? And I don't know if for those watching on the video streams, they can probably see what John's holding. There's a giant wooden plaque, and it's got a brass shield on there, and there's a whole bunch of names along the side, and each name has the winners from each year of the original Les Voyageurs Canoe Race.
And the times. So this is, I think, the fourth generation version of the shield. So that the first shield, I have no idea what it looked like. Again, it's set up in 1926, and at that point in time, it was done sort of in memory of my great uncle who was killed in World War One. My uncle, my dad's older brother, he wound up heading off to World War II. Interesting story in his own right. He was a cadet. He signed up. He was too young to go overseas. So they put him in charge of training all of the guys that were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years older. When they eventually went over, he became of age. And so he fought at some of the major battles, and he became a lieutenant colonel at the age of 23, which is incredibly young. Anyway, he was killed in Germany towards the end of the war. So the plaque was modified to include his name on that as well. And coincidentally, the first one was Edward Payson. The second one was Ernest Payson, and I'm John Payson. So this is, again, part of the history side of it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. The medallion at the top, not sure where it came from, but it's an engraving of what I think is Lower Fort Garry. And so elements of the plaque have been retained. I had it remade because the original ones, you actually couldn't see the names very well. They were all getting worn out and whatnot. At one point, the trophy was destroyed in the 1954 Canoe Club fire, which the place burned to the ground. They lost all their boats. It was a real disaster. And then, so again, I had this remade, and most of the elements are original. It's only the names around the perimeter that are different. And if you look down here,
yeah, on the bottom there,
there's a space. 2026, it'll have somebody's names in it, and it's going to be really curious to see who.
Yeah, that's going to be so cool. So just to clarify that, so the winners, it'll be from the tandem canoe category of this year's Les Voyageurs Challenge. So the 2-day event, if you are paddling a tandem canoe and you win, you and your partner's name will be added to this plaque and be a part of history forever.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm going to be looking for a home for this when it's done. I mean, sitting in my basement is not cool. It would be really interesting to see whether one of the historical organizations in Manitoba would say, you know what, this is pretty cool. This is a piece of history. Let's take this over and keep it as a display. So I don't know if the listeners have any ideas, but I'd be more than willing to entertain them.
Yeah, I've got a few ideas where that would make a great home, but we'll see who shows some interest in it. I think that's really cool, and that's going to be tempting for a lot of non-canoers maybe to switch over to canoeing this year. I'm tempted to. I want to canoe now. I want to paddle. That's really awesome. And it's really cool that you've taken and you've, replicated this original shield and plaque and produced something into what we have today. There's some pretty famous names on the shield. So like Don Starkell, a lot of Winnipeggers would know Don Starkell, right? He's probably one of the most famous. His name is on the plaque. What are some other names on the plaque?
1951, Starkell won it. Well, as I said, that Bill Brigden. The other names that are interesting was that there were two paddlers that came down from Flin Flon in the 60s, Norm Crerar and Gib McEachern. And they revolutionized marathon paddling because they came up with the whole idea of, why do you steer on every stroke? Why don't you just switch sides and use that to change directions and control it? And if you don't do the J-stroke on every stroke, you can go really, really fast. So they came down, did their thing, beat everybody else by an hour, and set the whole standard for as far as I know it, for modern marathon style paddling today. So they won the event 3 years, and Norm Crerar is still alive and well, as the last time I talked to him.
Yeah. Well, maybe he wants to go for a shot at getting his name on the plaque this year.
Again. So the other thing that went along with this was that people that paddled got a Le Voyageur pin, and it was a little pin about this long that clipped in and whatnot. And I've haven't found one. I found a picture of one, and we are going to have them made for the event this year with a special sort of 100-year designation on them. And everybody that paddles will get one. I remember asking Norm Crerar if he still had his, and he laughed and told me that, well, he was young and there were a lot of nice young ladies hanging around the finishing line. And so one of them wound up with his pin. So, another story there.
That's really cool how we'll have those pins as well
Yeah.
for participants of the race. That'd be good. And then, well, we'll have like the special T-shirt and other swag to go with the race. Yeah, let you put that shield down. How much does that thing weigh?
It's made of walnut and padauk. Padauk is an African hardwood that's red in color. Yeah, it's relatively heavy. You wouldn't want to paddle with it.
No, but it's neat how you had the stripes, so the red and the wood to go with the stripes of the canoe club's colors, the red and the black. Which is it black? It looks black.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
the walnut's quite dark. Yeah, so if you look over my shoulder, that's my grandfather's Winnipeg Canoe Club Commodore shirt. And my dad had one, my aunt had one, my mom had one. They're made of wool. They're horrible. I can remember actually paddling in one when I did my first marathon race as a sort of testament. I hated it. It itched like mad. It was, yeah, a lot to be said about modern fibers and comfort.
Definitely, yeah. Well, I'm sure we could maybe reproduce that using a more breathable and scratch-free material.
Yeah. Again, it's sort of all this stuff is interesting, and it ties back to a completely different time.
What do you think your grandfather would think of us carrying on this tradition and the torch of his original race here?
It's hard to know. I mean, he really did it out of love. He was quite the character. He was a lawyer in Winnipeg. He was on the school board. He was an alderman. He was one of the leaders of the Winnipeg General Strike after World War One. He was a bit of a crotchety old fart, but I think he'd be tickled about this because it's to think that his grandson sort of picked it up and ran with it just because. I mean, that's kind of special. I think he'd be tickled pink that sort of paddling tradition has stayed in the family. I mean, both my boys were competitive dragon boat paddlers when they were 16 and 17. So, that whole legacy continues.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear that and to be carrying on, this tradition that, or for myself to be a part of this tradition, and not even knowing that I was doing it in the first place. But here in this year to be a big part of this race is it's gonna be a special year, and I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of people coming out from across Canada and the U.S. to participate. So it's nice for them to get to hear a bit about the changes this year and the history leading up to where we are today. And then, so the other change too is the day one finish line is different this year. So instead of finishing at St. Vital Park, we're moving to the Forks, that's an amazing location. It's gonna be great for paddlers and spectators. I know we're still working out the details, but we're working on having some displays set up and some additional programming there at the finish line for people for everyone to come and check out and see some of their old canoes and paddles and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll be doing is reaching out to the some of the historical canoeing groups across North America. They regularly get together and host symposia where they show off boats and things like that. So I'm going to see if I can get this on the calendar, and hopefully they'll be able to bring their canoes up and show them off on the Saturday. And then we're going to have a heritage canoe class on the Sunday where, if the boat's not more than 50 years old, you can't be in that group. And so I expect to see a lot of the old wood canvas chestnuts, Peterboroughs, and some of the American versions. And again, it's a different time. It's a different type of boat. Yeah, they're very, very different paddle. The other thing too is I've got friends that are going to come and bring a 26-foot Voyageur out, and that's more a testament to the fur trade history. And if you think about it, Lower Fort Garry was a canoeing hub. The Voyageurs would head off from there, wound up going up the Saskatchewan, both north and south, and to Rocky Mountain House and transporting furs. And so they'll be racing on the Sunday and, have the boat on display on the Saturday. And I'm hoping that there's actually an organization that does recreations of the historical canoe brigades in these big boats. And I'm hoping that maybe we can convince a few of them to come out and show off their stuff. And they paddle in costume and all of that stuff. And to show us their stuff on Saturday and then come out and paddle a race on the Sunday.
There's a local group here in Winnipeg that's involved in, I forget the name of the Riviere Brigade, something along that line. And they came out and did their paddle challenge in our first year, 2019, and they paddled the Voyageur canoe dressed in all the traditional clothing. And they were having a great time. They sang, I think, the whole way from Winnipeg to Lockport, singing the whole way. It looked like a lot of fun. In addition, I do have another group that is bringing a Voyageur canoe this year. They want to put together a competitive team and try and get the best time or beat the Voyageur record. So there are some people, 10 people, I believe, in that boat, perhaps, I think, or eight to 10 people they're looking to fill. Yeah, so it'd be really neat. We're gonna have a lot of variety of different boats and people this year. Really looking forward to it.
It's going to be fun for me. I haven't been back to Winnipeg in a long time. It's going to be an opportunity to get back, see some of the old sites. My family are all, buried in one of the churchyards, close to the river's edge. So I'll do the pilgrimage out there. One of the things that I wanted to mention was back in the days, women were not allowed to paddle in the Les Voyageurs. There was complete segregation forever. And so the women, they wound up developing their own races that not nearly as vigorous and whatnot. But my aunt was a very serious paddler as well. So she would go and win the women's events and whatnot. But let's just say this year, we're not going to discriminate based on gender. The first tandem canoe that crosses the finish line gets their name on the shield.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many competitive people of out there. It could be anyone winning. Based on past winners in the paddle challenge, in the canoe category alone, I have some predictions, but we'll see who shows up. So canoers out there, the marathon canoers, I encourage y'all to come out this year, spread the word, and let's see whose name gets on that plaque.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, typically, how many have you had in the past? People showing up on an annual basis?
It varies anywhere between 100 and 130 people, depending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
all boat classes, right? So canoes, kayaks, sups, dragon boat, rowing, everything.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll be able to up that number a little bit this year.
I think we will. Based on the feedback, it sounds like it's going to be a big year. And I'll probably have to cap registration. We'll see how things roll out. So anyone who wants to sign up, I recommend signing up sooner rather than later, just in case we do have to cap the numbers.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The rivers were a critical part of the development of most major cities in Canada. I mean, that was our transportation network. And if you look at city planning and development over the years, everything was focused on the rivers. And then as railways came along and often as rivers became polluted and whatnot, the sort of the industrial areas would took over and the cities would refocus elsewhere, not on the river. And it's only been in the last, 30, 40, 50 years that the benefits of rivers as an amenity piece in cities. And so there's been a refocusing and a reorientation towards waterways. And you're certainly here in Edmonton on the North Saskatchewan. When I was growing up, you never see a boat on it, hardly ever. When we were busy doing the dragon boating, we would have tens of thousands of people on the river training, being more active. Nowadays with when the weather gets good, there are floaties, there's stand-up paddle boards, you name it. And so to see the change in river use over time is wonderful. And so, I think the Red has probably gone through the same thing. You're seeing way more use than you used to. And so bringing back this event, enhancing your event. Yeah, it's getting people back on the river.
Well, John, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today and sharing your story and the story of the Winnipeg Canoe Club and all of our paddlers in the past, especially the Les Voyageurs Canoe Race. It's really cool how this year we're bridging that 100-year gap and celebrating that race with the Red River Paddle Challenge this year. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you this fall.
Well, when I was first thinking of this 5 years ago, my thought was it'd be really nice, but logistically trying to pull it off from Edmonton, I'm not sure it's going to work. But I'll tell you, to discover that you were doing the same thing and that we could piggyback the two together and that you were open to cooperating, I thought, this is it. We're going to go out and we're going to have a good time. We're going to make this work. And I'm just looking forward to meeting all sorts of other paddlers from all over Canada to say, you know what, you're continuing a long line of things that you're probably not even aware of it.
John, thank you for sharing your incredible stories and some of Manitoba's paddling history with us. Registration is open for the 2026 Red River Paddle Challenge and Les Voyageurs Challenge. Don't miss out on being part of history. Sign up now to secure your spot as space is limited. The early bird deadline is June 30th, and prices go up on July 1st. So act fast to take advantage of the discounted rate. Whether you're a seasoned paddler or new to the sport, this is an event you won't want to miss. Visit our website to register and find out more details. Can't wait to see you there.